Welcome to Running Unicorns, sports talk that goes beyond stats and stadiums. I'm your host, Kristina Southern Townsend. Each episode, we take one word and run with it, exploring how sport connects us, shapes us, divides us, and ultimately unites us. Welcome to the club. Come, run with us. Hey, it's Kristina with Running Unicorns, and so excited to have Joe Flynn with us today. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Kristina.
Yeah, we're pumped. We're going to talk about the humans behind the helmet and all the things. But Joe, will you first just give us an introduction to yourself, your background, and how we ended up here today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. My background is in nonprofit fundraising, and so the last 10 plus years, I've been working with nonprofits to help them raise more money. The one that people have heard of is the Make-A-Wish Foundation, but I've worked with other small nonprofits and now working at a company that helps provide resources to smaller organizations to give them the tools they need to better engage their community and fund their causes. But on the side of all that, I've always been a sports fan, and I've always been interested in the stories that go beyond on the field. I felt like, I was a really well-educated fantasy football nerd, so there wasn't much that announcers could tell me that I didn't know, except every once in a while. Maybe there's some dead space, in between a couple plays, and they're just looking to kill time, and they're like, hey, I was hanging out in the locker room before, and this player told me this story that really piques my interest. So I've always been a sponge for that, and then I started doing content creation, regurgitating or digging deeper into those stories, and then telling a story around that. So, for example, I heard this story about how there was this tight end that was recruited up in Northern California. When the coach went up to recruit this player, he ended up coming across Aaron Rodgers. And I was like, that can't be real. I dug into it, and in fact, it's true. So I made a video about it. I was looking for a way to merge these two things, my nonprofit background along with this storytelling. And so I enrolled in the course where I met you, George Washington University, and wanted to learn more about sports philanthropy. So I think that's what brought us here.
Awesome. Such a good summary. And I had the same kind of inclination of, I thought, how can I blend my passion for social impact in sports? It's been so great to connect with people like you and see other people who are having these conversations and showing this side of sports that I don't feel like gets as much attention. I think it is more now, which is really cool. So we're riding that wave, which is awesome. So just kind of kick it off a little fun. One of the things I love about sports is walk-on songs. So, Joe, what's your walk-on song? Do you have one? Do you need one?
So I had a job interview and they asked me the same question once, and I said the wrong song name.
Oh no!
So I want to make sure I say the right name of the song. But
Let's get it right.
Yeah, let me. It's Lupe Fiasco, but the show goes on. That's the name of the song.
Okay.
So I love that song. I have actually a playlist for running. I know that's a passion of yours. There's I think 6 or 8 songs on there. I call it Last Set. So I'm on the last set at the gym, or I'm on the last mile. One of those 6 songs will just elevate me to that next level, and that is the ace in the hole right there. That song.
Yes.
So if I had that as a walk-up song, I'd probably be hitting homers every time.
I have a similar kind of a push playlist when I'm really trying to get myself going. So are you a runner? I got to ask the question. Are you?
I don't think I would identify as a runner. I go for runs.
I need to do a whole episode on people calling themselves runners or not. So we got to get more people to own it. We got to.
No, I've been around runners, and I know I ain't one of them.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll dissect that later. But so humans behind the helmet. Tell me about this. I know a little bit about fantasy football. I've done some fantasy bachelor with the TV show, which is fun. But what's the beginner take and what you think would be interesting for people to know?
Of course, yeah. So the beginner take, for folks who aren't familiar with fantasy football, essentially, depending on how well a player does in a particular game, that will correspond to points that you get on your team. If a player scores a touchdown, then your team gets points. Each week, you're matched up. Say you and I go head to head, and all of my guys score a cumulative 90 points, and all of your guys score a cumulative 100 points. You beat me that week. So we go head to head for about 14 weeks, and then go into the playoffs, and a champion is crowned at the end of the season. It's fun for really any player because you don't need to be a hardcore fan to get into it. You draft a team. You could be like my wife, and you could be like, I like that guy's hair. I'm going to take that guy. Ends up that he has a career year that year. Luckily, he had a good hair day that day. Yeah. But then you could be an ultra nerd and you could spend all of your downtime listening to podcasts, trying to get an edge, scrolling through the internet, following all the beat writers saying, oh, how's that guy doing as a response to his injury? I'm probably much more on that side of the spectrum. I also have this passion for social good. And so I came up with this idea of fantasy football for good and specifically a draft guide. So when you're more on the advanced side and you want to prep for the season, you draft a team preseason and you determine who's going to be on my team versus who's going to be on your team. And a lot of times people will utilize stats to determine if they want to draft a player or not. However, I wanted to give people an extra layer of information when they're drafting their team. So that's really who they are off the field. So what I did was I created a draft guide so folks can go in and they can sort by causes. There's about 50 or 60 causes in there, all the way from ALS to women's empowerment to hunger and homelessness. And you can sort by players who have supported these causes. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not naive enough to think that you're probably going to forego your first round pick of maybe Christian McCaffrey for a guy who did a pet adoption event just because you love animals that much. I think, the competitor in me
You never
always would
know.
say, yeah, I would tell you, you could always still get that guy later, but in the way the fantasy draft works is later on as it goes on, the names might become less familiar, especially to a surface level fan. And so you use this guide to say, okay, well, both these guys are available. This guy, for example, Michael Pittman Jr., he's a wide receiver on the Colts. He has a story where he overcame a stutter as a kid, and now he goes and he does public speaking. He talks about his experience. And I think that's really relatable because a lot of
Yeah.
times people look up to these players as superhuman, as perfect. And we forget that they also have flaws and things they overcame. And so you have that guy on one hand, and you have another guy like Khalil Shakir. He's a wide receiver on the Buffalo Bills, and he's created his own pet adoption event because he's an animal lover. So you're like, oh man, well, I love pets. I got a dog. You're like me. You got a dog a year and a half ago, and all of a sudden you feel like a dog lover. You're like, okay, I'm going to draft this guy. So now you have a deeper connection to who these players are, and I think that's really important, especially because in fantasy football, I think a lot of times fantasy football players think of these NFL players as a machine to create stats for their team and forget
Yes.
that there is, and you alluded to this, the tagline, the human under the helmet. I think that that's really what I'm trying to illuminate through this project is the human under the helmet.
I love that. And a different kind of take on that is that, often sports people talk about players and the game, the experience as a product. And it is from a business perspective. But to your point, I think that human part is easy to forget.
Mhm.
Um, my husband played hockey in college, and I remember he talked about people heckling him, and then one of his friends
Mhm.
came and said, "Oh, hey," and they realized he had friends,
Yeah.
watching him play. So it's easy for people to get so focused on that, but when you have something like that that really humanizes someone from a stutter to a pet lover, it does bring it home. And even as simple as, I feel like how many Monday mornings in the office are people talking about the game or whatever happened,
Mhm.
and having that extra insight is interesting, right? Like you can talk stats, you can talk all that, but when you have an insight like that, it to me, it not only makes the conversation more interesting, but it makes you more interesting. And so it gives you a little bit of an edge in those conversations, right?
Really relate to that because yeah, sometimes my fantasy football became so big for me that it became part of my personality. People would come up to me and they would ask me advice. I had to tell them, it's like, hey, I don't know more than you do. We're all looking at the same stats. I just really love it. Now I feel like, hey, maybe I don't necessarily have any edge over any specific fantasy football expert, but I can tell you a little about these players, or maybe I give you the resources so that you can learn a little more. So, yeah, it does make the conversation more interesting, like you said.
Yeah, it does, and I think again, it gives kind of non-traditional sports fans an opportunity to engage beyond just picking them out because you like their team colors. So I love that. How did you
Yeah,
find these stories? I know it was a lot of grassroots kind of scraping the internet.
yeah, it was a lot of effort. I think one story that stuck out to me, there's so many, Christina. My draft guide has 180 players, and on average, there's probably like at least two stats, off the field stats per player, but anywhere from one to three. Every player has at least one stat. One story that oh man, there's so many. There's two that I'll share that a lot of players people out there may already know, but one, Bijan Robinson, he's a running back for the Atlanta Falcons. He dedicates some of his time in the off season as a swim instructor. Apparently, as a child, he survived a near drowning experience. The details at least like weren't completely public, but it sounded like it was traumatic enough for him to think, okay, well, it's really important for me to go out into my community and make sure that kids know how to swim. To me, that like really tells the story of who he is. I think it's incredibly beautiful that he could spend his
Yeah.
off season doing all of these things. He's in a pool with kids, hands on, teaching them how to swim. You got to think about going a step back from that. It's like you can't just any player can just start a youth camp, right? Because they're already an expert in football. Like, hey, I can teach you how to run a route. But for him to get to that level, it means he had to dedicate time on his own in a classroom, learning how to become a swim instructor. I think that's amazing. Another story that stuck out to me was Kyron Williams. He's a running back for the Los Angeles Rams. He donated 20 washers and dryers to the Los Angeles Unified School District. The reason is because he found out that kids were going to school in dirty clothes because they didn't have the chance
Mm.
to wash their clothes at home. As a result, the attendance was dropping because those kids, there's a humanity aspect to going to school in clothes that are clean. This would not only help build that humanity, but also help with any truancy or attendance issues. So that was remarkable. Another one is Dak Prescott. He created the Fight Faith Finish Foundation, and one of the tenets of his foundation is to help people get screened early for cancer. His mom died of cancer. It was a mission of his to help people get screened. So he's like, hey, kickoff event. Let me get my teammates and the coaches and the folks in the front office. We should all just get screened. Good promo event, right? Turns out the VP of communications for the Cowboys got screened. This is a story you can read, and he found that he was positive for cancer, and as a result of that early screening, he was able to get the treatment that he needed. And so,
Amazing.
I think I think a lot of times when we hear these stories, it's easy for as fans to think it's just a puff piece, but there is really a ripple effect that changes the trajectory of people's lives, and it's all a
Mhm.
result of sports. So those are three stories that come off the top of my head that just blow me away.
Oh, man, yeah, that's 3 out of 180, right? I mean, and I'm sure and how many more, I'm sure again, and this is just football, and so there's just so much to dig into, and what you've done is so unique with the lens that you've taken it of turning into this draft guide, but I love those examples you shared, and that shows such the breadth of these athletes, and again, the backgrounds they have and how they're choosing to use their influence. And maybe not even it may not even been they're using their influence. It's just like you mentioned that the traumatic, swim experience turned into I want to do something about this. Which is incredible. I love those.
Yeah.
Great stories.
Just to quickly finish the answer your second question, my goal was to do 5 players a day. Ultimately, when I pitched this idea to Lisa, our professor in the program, my original idea was 25 players in the draft guide.
Oh
But
man.
there was a voice inside my head that said, who's going to use a draft guide that only
Mm.
has 25 players? So the perfectionist in me needed to find a way to do all of them. So I quickly was like 31 days in May. If I did 5 players a day, I could do 150 just through searching certain terms, community impact, donations, gives back, my cause, my cleats, certain things, sourcing only legitimate websites and legitimate news articles, and a combination of using some AI tools, I was able to disseminate all the information I collected into a spreadsheet and then into the website fantasyfootballforgood.com.
That's amazing. The story you shared about the laundromat reminded me. I attend the DCU Sports Town Hall. I'm in the DMV area, and one of the initiatives they mentioned was getting sports bras for girls. There's a drop off around preteen and teenage years, and they found that girls need sports bras, and it wasn't just one, but it was two or three, so they can wash them and have a clean start. And those are little things that really have an impact. And so, from whether it's washing your clothes at school or washing a uniform, those are the things that I think we can spark ideas and conversations of how can we take these examples or someone who is setting a standard or calling attention to an issue and say, how can I do this in my community? And that's one of my goals is to affect decision makers, whether that's at the home to the boardroom of speaking up in your PTA to a large company or a small company. You can take that initiative and take these ideas and say, how can we amplify this, whether that's inspired by this athlete, take it to your own community and business or personal. With that, I'm curious, how has any of this affected your personal decisions? I look at this from decision making in personal to business, has it made you think about your life differently, or your profession, or how's this impacted you doing this research and curating this the guide?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think at a minimum, I should probably have the most altruistic fantasy football team in history going forward.
Yeah,
Um, I might have the people be like, why do you have four kickers? Well, you know what kind of community work these four kickers are doing?
a
Um,
little bit.
uh, no, but I've really kind of dedicated my life to this at this point. Going back to college, I studied abroad in South Africa, got my first opportunity to work in a nonprofit, and have worked in nonprofits since then. And now I'm 35, so it's been 16 years of working in nonprofit space. I think if anything, it's just reignited my passion, and just my belief in humanity. Like I
Mm,
said, I don't think I'm going to change anything about what I'm doing. If anything, it's just reinvigorated me to remember, wow, there's so much good that's going on out there. And I think
cool.
what's inspiring mostly is that these stories, there's more traction around this, all the way down to the NIL level. We see athletes now doing this for good at the college level. I went to University of Connecticut. I'll give a shout out to Paige Beckers. She was using her NIL money for good, before, people really knew what you could or couldn't use NIL money for. She was helping to make sure that kids that were on campus that were food insecure were had like a food bank there. That just reinvigorates me to continue to do this type of work, to work in the nonprofit space, and especially if the opportunity comes in the future to work with athletes, that would be amazing. It continues to provide that thrust, that and acknowledgement. This is the right path. That giving back is it's an important way to spend our life.
It's huge, and, I appreciate that, and it's always fun to have an athlete that you got a connection to. It does make it more personal. I grew up in Ohio, so I'm a big Ohio State fan, and all teams Ohio. I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge football fan growing up, but, Ohio State, you gotta claim that. But I remember when Joe Burrow gave his speech and gave a shout out to the food insecurity in Ohio, and it just was huge, and it meant so much to me as someone who's um, seen hunger in, my own community, and then the power of someone just giving you a little bit of a push, and creating an opportunity that I don't know, I don't even know if I have the words, but just really touched me that in that moment, he remembered where he came from. And, and even from that perspective of to perform well in your sport, you have to have good nutrition, right? And so, it's a full circle, and that really touched me. So I started paying a little more attention to Joe. I mean, I knew who he was, I knew, but I'm not gonna lie, it bumped him up for me. To me, that's meaningful. And so even if you have someone who may not be paying attention to the level that a team would like, or for whatever reason, caught my attention.
If you go on the website, go to fantasyfootballforgood.com and search Joe Burrow, what you'll find is exactly what you said. He has never forgotten where he's come from, and his foundation, from what I could see from the outside looking in, looks like a family venture, and it seems like his whole entire family is just dedicated to giving back. One thing I remember about his foundation is the end of the year report that they put out every year was extremely thorough, transparent, and that, for someone like me that was just doing the research, it was like, oh, thank God, somebody's like, here's my stats, and sometimes it takes a little more digging, but yeah, I mean, he's an incredible human being, and I think again, people just think of him as a quarterback, but there's a lot more going on than that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'll be candid, I appreciate reports. They're done well.
Mhm.
I'm human, I'm not perfect, but I do appreciate when people try to do their due diligence, and there are websites like Charity Navigator that will, score nonprofits and efforts. And so for people who do wanna make sure that if they just because they see an athlete doing something, that they can kind of, vet how that's being done, or anyone who's promoting a nonprofit or an NGO, that they can go see how those scores are. And I think Charity Watchdog is another one. It's good to see, how the impact is stacking up from these transparency scores and things like that. So there's a way that if you do want to donate to something or be a part of it, you can also make sure that people are, you know, following protocols and all of that.
Absolutely, yeah, because like not every nonprofit is created equal. I've
Yeah.
been on the inside. I know that that's true.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So kind of shifting gears, what would you want someone to have be a takeaway who's paddling up with us today as they go into their life and their community and look around, or even their home?
We talked about like the idea of like really thinking about the human. It doesn't have to be an athlete. In a world where there's so many people, I live in a city, densely populated area where, I think a lot of times I look around and for example, here in California, homelessness is a major issue and it's easy to forget that there's a human inside of all of these people and they're not just, somebody who's an impediment. They're not just like a person that's lying on the sidewalk, or they're not just like, somebody who's like, driving slowly in front of me. All these people there's humanity to all of us. So as cliche as it sounds, trying to remember that. And for me, what helps is just trying to set some intentions in the beginning of the day. Like whoever I come across, can I come to them with love and just like a whole heart? And easier said than done, but if I can do that, then that's what I try to do. And so it beyond fantasy football, I think just trying to look at the human under the helmet in all of us is what we can all try to do a little better job of.
I love that. I think that's such a good and powerful insight and takeaway because I think there's kind of two opportunities to humanize and to not dehumanize. We're all human here, and when we make mistakes, I feel like in this follow and unfollow, subscribe unsubscribe culture, it can be very easy to hold people to a very high bar that we may
Yeah,
not even want to be held to. So I think it's a powerful message, whether that be in fandom or in life, to yeah, just take a beat, realize we're all just doing our best here. I heard a quote that was, "We can either win or learn. How can we take an opportunity that's not about failing, it's about learning?"
to me, it brings up the idea of acceptance. Like, okay, I can either be mad about this situation or I can accept that as my situation and try and get better from it. So I like that win or learn.
Where oh, yeah, where can people find the guide? Let's hear the website
And
again.
fantasyfootballforgood.com. I also have social media, Joe Flynn Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. If you want to go and check out some of these stories, and I'll be promoting more of the about the draft guide and on LinkedIn. So you can find me anywhere, but fantasyfootballforgood.com is the number one spot to go.
Awesome. You guys heard it here first. Get ready, get that draft guide ready and do your research. So shifting gears just kind of for fun.
Mhm.
One of the things we talk about running unicorns is opening hearts, doors, minds, and wallets. Taking that, what would you hope that people would open from today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's easy to think of like opening your wallet is like an easy way to make a difference. And I think I would say open your heart. And
Mm,
to what I mean by that is like if I'm going to keep it focused on the fantasy football draft guide, what I've seen a lot in the past couple of years is that like when a player gets hurt, the other team that played against him sometimes will donate to that person's charity. For
cool.
example, Mark Andrews, he had this drop in the playoffs against the Buffalo Bills. It was a pretty massive play, and the Bills fans swarmed his
Um,
foundation, which focuses on diabetes and helping folks with diabetes, and
mm,
there was like $150,000 in donations as a result. So
amazing.
I think that's an example of opening our hearts. So I would encourage fans to continue to find ways to do that. If you're going to draft one fantasy football team, maybe figure out who your first round draft pick is, and use this draft guide to find out what's their personal foundation, what is the cause that matters most to them, and maybe you make a commitment where you say, hey, for every point that this person gets me this year, I will donate $1. And
I
that
like it.
could be, yeah, I mean, maybe that's $100 or $200, but that is to me like the example of a win-win. You got the points in your fantasy team. That
Mhm.
player gets to know that they're making an impact in the community, but most importantly, your dollars are going to go and have a ripple effect. So yeah, I guess if I were to say open, it's an example of all of them. Open your mind to know that fantasy football goes beyond the field. Open your heart to give back to those causes that are important to those players, and we could do that through a monetary donation.
I love that. Nailed it. Mic drop right there. Well, just for fun to kind of wrap up, let's hear where I like to end with some running questions, but it can be in general. So, just getting to know Joe a little bit. What are you currently running from, to, or for? Something that's keeping you running. It keeps you
Yeah, I
running.
think that they all kind of go to the same thing. Had a major heart issue when I was 20 years old, about 15 years ago, and that helped me realize that life can be pretty short, and nothing is guaranteed to any of us. So I have used exercise as a way to provide me with longevity, and to run away from poor health, but also to run towards more life so that I can be here, so that I can make an impact. Running and exercise for me is definitely something that really keeps me sane. I manage a sales team, and I feel like when I show up to that morning huddle at 8 a.m. and I've exercised that morning, it's so much more to give. But that's just like a microcosm of, when I exercise, when I keep myself in shape, then I have more to give in life in general. So yeah, I'm just running so that I can run another day.
I love that. Someone once said something about, when you take care of yourself, your time expands. Clearly that's one of the reasons I'm drawn to the sports industry is it can make you feel alive just to move and to feel your heart pumping as hard as it can be. That's one of the reasons I specifically love running, but I love that. So I appreciate that, Joe. So you mentioned where people can find you, but again, Joe Flynn, and one more time.
Joe Flynn Sports on
Okay.
all the spots, and fantasyfootballforgood.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe. Well, hopefully you'll continue running with running unicorns, and excited to see what this fall
And
brings.
now I have another thing to listen to when I'm out for runs. I can't wait to listen to more of these episodes. I really appreciate that you asked me to be on, Kristina.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining us. And now it's your turn. We invite you to continue the conversation and run with it to your circles of influence. From the boardroom to the kitchen table, share how sport and play can connect, unite us, and ultimately be a positive impact in our communities. Life is short, and we're so grateful you spent this precious time with us. Go outside, go for a walk, sign up for that 5K, get tickets to something, get sweaty, and have fun. We hope you'll be back soon. And in the meantime, join us on Strava, social media, or visit runningunicorns.com to learn more. Thanks so much for being here. And until next time, keep running. If you had a good time today, tell us in the comments what you enjoyed and what you hope to hear more of. You're also welcome to reach us via email, team@runningunicorns.com, with a message or voice note. This has been a production of Southtown Communications.